Welcome to Fantastic Females, our adventure to finding the mythical island of freedom together. I'm Kalyani.
And I'm Rupali. We are your next door finance experts sharing our experiences in the world of money and energetics. Hi, welcome back to Fantastic Females.
We're excited to lay out today what we hope to achieve and discuss going forwards in our podcast.
And what is that, Kalyani?
I think when we started talking about it, one of our first few discussions was about financial coaching, and very organically, this podcast has become a medium for us to reach out to more people than we could have ever imagined as a group coaching model. And what does that mean for you, Rupali? Coaching is an overused term currently. Let's go a little deeper into it.
Yeah, so to me, what it means is really to share information, to have an interactive approach whereby every listener takes away something relevant to you each time you come in and listen. So it's not just textbook knowledge or it's not just definitions, it's more, okay, and now what? What do I do with it myself?
Exactly. And a lot of the coaching that we've experienced or we've studied ourselves also teaches us to ask leading questions so that the mentee, the coachee arrives at their answers by themselves, because truly all your power is within you. So through this podcast, we hope to kind of light that spark in you or ask the right questions, spark the right conversations to take you through that journey in answering your questions for yourselves. Otherwise, we're also available on all the social media platforms as Fantastic Females, and you can DM us for any additional support.
So as part of this, I'm like a nerd, and so I always have my notebook next to me. And so what I encourage people that resonate with that kind of pattern is to have a notepad next to you, to take notes, because you may have little sparks of ideas, information that you want to take away and review later on or come back to us with, and so that'll be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Both Rupali and I have a gazillion notebooks, one for each topic in our lives, and we can't function without them. So encourage you to make a notebook for Fantastic Females and take the maximum value from this discussion.
So what is it that you do, Kalyani? In terms of finance, what is your day-to-day? What do you cover? Just to give our listeners some kind of context of what we do day-to-day.
That's very interesting. So I trade in the markets. One part of it is to have long-term investments, which are either a few months old or some are even a few years old. Recently, the market hasn't been very encouraging for shorter investments that are called swing trades that are typically a few weeks old. So I'm doing more long-term investments, monitoring them on a day-to-day basis, and also doing day trading. So that is only done while the market is up and running. I trade in the US market, so usually that's in the evenings. So in the daytime is my time for research. I'm a big nerd as well, and I love researching what's happening in the markets, how that impacts the flow of kind of demand and supply, etc. And also I have my other business, Trading Mom, that I've mentioned in a brief before. So I have group coaching and one-on-one coaching in the daytime where I teach trading to individuals. Maybe you can help us understand a little more about what you do, Rupali, as well.
So what I do is my day job is as a risk quant research analyst within asset management, and what that means is really to understand the numbers and to put together a portfolio of investments, a portfolio which is a group of investments, and so to understand where to invest the money, what to do with it, what are the pros and cons. It's a very long-term nature, but what a key component of my job is to keep track of markets, understand any opportunities, understand the difference in investments such as real estate, for example, and a deposit. What does it mean? And so this is what we're going to go into in the future. But research is a big part of it, and any new topic that comes about in life, that's my personal way of operating, is research the hell out of every single thing that sparks an interest, and so that's what I do.
Yeah, I think it's the same with me as well. And I also love to see how concepts that we studied as models um, actually play out in real life. A lot of it is kind of communicated via news, or while we research, it all really makes sense from our backgrounds. So I really enjoy seeing that come into play. And yeah, I find this super interesting.
Just to add to that, I think the one thing that we both have common in terms of what we do day in, day out is shine back the light on ourselves and understand where we are coming from. And this is where energetics come in. And our personal growth is a day-to-day experience. And this is what we are hoping to share with you.
Absolutely. And let's now get thick into some technicals and start by talking about finance and money, what it means to us, bring some definitions in.
Yep. And what is money, Kalyani?
So, sounding like a textbook, money is an exchange of value. That's kind of the first sentence I remember reading in my economics textbook.
In terms of finance, when we Google the definition of finance, I actually laughed out loud because it says the management of large amounts of money, especially by governments and large companies. What is that?
Finance is made to be very inaccessible and very distant with the use of such terminology and definitions, whereas it's super relevant to all of us at an individual level.
It's basically managing your money, right? Or that's it. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's basically it. There's nothing more or less to it. Finance is an art or a science of learning how to manage your money. And a big part of that is savings. What is our understanding of savings, Rupali?
Savings, I mean, we've always been told save because what if, so you save because in anticipation of a negative event, right? And that's what makes it so heavy.
Absolutely. It's always considered to be a safety net for a rainy day. It's always something that you work towards, you derive security from. And yeah.
Savings is really delayed consumption, isn't it? So basically, you don't spend today and you save to spend tomorrow.
Exactly. And at this point, we'd like to also introduce a concept of time value of money, which means simply to consider that there might be a candy that you remember buying as a child yourselves, and that same candy now when you buy for your kids will cost a lot more. The candy is the same, the ingredients are the same, but the dollar value of the dollar that you spend on it has gone down, which is also called inflation. But we wanted to bring this up because in anticipation for delayed consumption, you kind of stash your cash, whereas that's losing its value.
Yeah, another way of thinking of it, and not such a technical way of time value of money, is I want to buy something today, excites me more than I want to buy something next year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think good management or personal finance is all about finding a good balance between these two. Neither of these extremes are healthy as a total kind of approach. So we will be going into the balance.
Yeah, investments is what you do with your savings, right? So savings is not spending your money, and investments is what you do with it.
Yeah, hopefully you're putting it aside in an instrument where you see your money grow. But how often do you see that investments have gone wrong? Investments have, you've been cheated out of an investment, for example. So we'd love for you to understand how lucky we are at this point in time where information is so easily accessible and available to us that it would be a shame if we don't make the most of that.
Investments is also linked to, your traditional idea of money under the mattress, isn't it? And what does that do for you, really?
It just gives this false sense of security. While we just mentioned the time value of money, that cash which is stashed under your mattress is in effect losing value. So, related to this, I would also like to introduce the concept of the system in commas, in inverted commas, whereby I perceive the system as the widely available conventional knowledge on all different forms of media. And this system, which includes the governments, the banks, the media kind of institutions, thrives from having little information that actually translates to power in the hands of retail investors.
Institutions basically set out information. You see these ads, you don't understand very much of it. That's a way of controlling the power, right? The information is your power, and so that's how they keep power.
Exactly. And something that really stuck with me was banks or your parents or education keeps pushing you towards building up on savings and putting them in banks, while they tell you investments, especially stocks that I've been exposed to, stock trading is risky. So stay away from that. But banks, in effect, pool all the savings that you put together in them and invest on your behalf in the same markets. So, isn't this a little fishy when you actually think about it? We would just like for you to ponder over this and what impact that has.
Yep. In terms of timing, Kalyani, when is the right time?
I think in the history of time, there's never been a better time than now. Once again, banging on about ease of information, but that's such a big aspect of this. It's almost about taking back control in your hands. Previously, like I said, banks would invest on your behalf or a financial advisor would invest on your behalf. Whereas I would also like to introduce the concept of contrarian thinking. One proponent of that is Robert Kiyosaki, who talks about employee mindset versus growth mindset of an entrepreneur, like the traditional kind of trajectory of taking university loans, mortgages out versus using debt constructively to build assets and passive income. And this is still so different to what the herd mentality around us or what the majority ends up doing, that we're here to kind of empower you in making these bold decisions for yourselves.
Yeah, employee mindset is really a safety net, isn't it? Again, coming back to how we were brought up, what we thought a job is versus not having a job is. And having a job was considered to be a safety net. But what we've not been taught and what we may not know is the costs of those jobs.
Exactly. Comes back to what I mentioned before of emotional stability versus financial stability and how there is still a way to have both of them together. So moving on to some more technical kind of terminology, let's talk about economy. It's mentioned all around us. What is an economy?
An economy is the biggest financial unit of measure. It's related to a country's performance with money.
It studies the interaction of demand and supply. All of this is very, very technical. All you need to understand is it's measuring the performance of how the country is doing in terms of its money management, or that includes its industries, its exports, imports, etc., etc. And an economy ends up affecting all of us.
But why do I care about money? What's it to me?
Yeah, you might think there are people on the road who are very, let's say, creative. And I meet an artist and they think, oh, the economy is just for people in certain types of jobs or for people like you, Kalyani, not for me. But in effect, when you go to the petrol station, if you're driving a car or even if you're taking the metro, eventually the cost of rising fuel, as it is right now, will impact you, and it's become a very kind of live conversation in all our lives.
Yeah, the global economy we live in also means that most countries, actually all countries, are importing or exporting at some capacity. And so the plastic that's used on the chair that you sit today, that's impacted by the economy.
Yeah, exactly. And we're hearing about the semiconductor situation. We're hearing about wheat exports being impacted by the war on Ukraine. There are so many knock-off effects of what's happening in one part of the world, in other parts of the world, in the current climate, that it would only mean burying your head in the sand if you think that economy or economics doesn't impact your personal lives.
Yep, exactly. It impacts everyone, whether you acknowledge or not. It exists. whether you like it or not.
Exactly. The only aspect that makes it inaccessible, that makes people think it's not for me, is the jargon terminology that's used around it, and we are here to help you through that. With this, I would like to also share kind of where we come from in terms of being two women in finance, sharing this information, being on this platform, and using it to our advantage.
Exactly. I think being women, and actually men go through this too, but I can speak as a woman that I've really been empowered through knowledge. And this is what drove me to work towards something like this that could share knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to unpack when we go into this gender conversation. I would really want to emphasize that we're talking from our perspective of being a product of this kind of mindset and this generation, and but not feeling a victim of it, because we invested and we were lucky enough to have the knowledge and awareness that we do. But in our experiences and around us, we've seen women take on more guilt from leaving their jobs or keeping them. We've seen them struggling to make financial ends meet if they're a single mom. We've seen them forcing on in their jobs while they think that the financial independence gives them a little more value in their family lives.
Yeah, this is absolutely independent of gender, and the way the whole dynamic has shifted across generations is, if I were to think about how my mom managed finances versus how I think of it, I mean, you can't even relate the two. And so this is where we come in, bring this information, and believe it or not, in many households, it's the woman that's managing the finance, savings, running the household in a very low-key, different way, versus the man who's the breadwinner and just brings the money in. So there are two components of this.
Yeah, somewhere the men are almost expected to know what to do with money, and many a times they may not know what they're doing and they may not be interested. We've seen some of that in our personal lives where we are both more finance and money savvy than our spouses are, and our spouses are happy to leave that to us. And it works really well for us. So the gender roles don't define us, but we do see a heightened need for women to feel a little more confident, a little bolder than they feel at this point. And they almost feel turned off by the mention of finance, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a shame because we're using it every day. It's just a word.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, seemingly at least, very dominated by masculine energy. And it's very like hustle mentality, very type A personality kind of vibe around it. Whereas it doesn't have to be, right?
It doesn't have to be. And speaking of, women in the corporate world, I mean, men like, well, okay, let's not make it about gender again, but, there's this traditional way of being in a corporate where you're expected to climb the corporate ladder, you're expected to work X number of hours, and if you don't, then you're weak, and, women are there, they get married, have children, and so there's this whole bias around it all. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's not what we are doing here. What we are doing is really to empower women through information, through knowledge, regardless of gender. Actually, my husband's going to be listening to this podcast too and learn from it too. So it's actually for my husband, and who's a man. So there you go.
Absolutely. I think true financial freedom or true freedom in any aspect comes from the freedom of choice. And that's what we're here to give you, a freedom of choice. And the choice can only be exercised if you know that that option exists, right? If you don't even know that there's an option to create passive income or make these investments that can cushion your savings or cushion your earnings, then there is no choice to make. So we're here to drive that freedom of choice.
So this brings us to a story that I found really interesting, and it really speaks to the beliefs and how we drive our lives in the corporate world and our careers and money. It's called The Fisherman's Story. So there was a businessman sitting on the beach in Brazil, watching a fisherman having caught a few fish, come back, happily going along his way, and he stopped him and he said, "So how long does it take you to fish?" And he's these many fish, and he says, "Oh, it just takes a couple of hours." And the businessman says, "Oh, okay, and so what do you do for the rest of the day?" So he says, "Well, I usually wake up, go fish, come back, play with my children, take a nap with my wife in the afternoon. I enjoy drinks with my buddies in the village, play guitar, sing and dance all night long, and go back to it the next morning." And the businessman says, look, I've got a PhD in business management. I could help you become a more successful person. From now on, spend more time fishing, catch more fish, and once you've saved money, you invest in more boats, you create a business, you list it on the stock exchange, you have many branches, and the fisherman is amused and says, oh, okay, and what after that? So the businessman heartily laughs. And then after that, you live like a king. And he's like, oh, and after that? So the businessman says, and after that, you can finally retire, move into a house in a fishing village, wake up early in the morning, catch a few fish, return home, play with kids, have a nice afternoon nap. And when it comes to the evening, you can enjoy your drink with your buddies. And the fisherman was puzzled and says, isn't that what I'm doing now? And this really explains the paradox.
Yeah, this is so interesting because growing up, I remember an Indian story. I don't remember the exact details, but it was to this effect that there was a poor Indian farmer who really wants to be rich, and he's only got like a small hut that he lives in. So one day he takes a nap and he starts dreaming while he's napping. And he dreams about getting a bigger piece of land, growing more crops on the land. To tend to the crops, he gets more cows and more bulls. He then also expands into getting more livestock. He gets more sheep, more hen, more goats, etc. And one day there's some sort of a mishap. The animals are chasing each other, and there's a fire on his farm, and the whole farm ends up burning down. And he's back to just having his hut. So he wakes up at this point feeling really scared and demotivated. And what he derives from this is, what's the point of doing anything? I'm exactly where I would have ended up despite all this expansion and growth. So I'm going to say exactly as I am and not work towards anything. It really drives how perception can actually impact your motivation.
Right, it's two sides of the same coin, isn't it?
Exactly. With that, I think we would like to end this second episode. And what's to come for us in future?
Well, I'm excited that the next one is going to be shining the light back at you as our listener and friend to help you start your journey with financial freedom.
So please share this podcast, leave your reviews, your comments to support us on our journey. We are so passionate about making your lives more abundant with this information.
So with that, we bring this episode of our financial adventure to an end. Please follow us on all social media platforms at Fantastic Females.